So basically we have like 4 sessions we'll be having. This is the first session out of that. And basically we'll be covering the overview of the Angular 4 and such things at a very high level. The next 2 sessions will be probably be hands-on, and a few of my colleagues will be giving. The last session will be a hands-on, and we'll be doing a small project kind of. So basically myself, Amit, and I have been like working on the Angular like couple of years, and on Angular 4 I've been working in the last 1 year. So probably I'm not an expert, but at least I know enough so that I can get you all guys started on Angular 4. So that is the idea of it. So anybody like can tell like what is the expectation you guys are here for? Like you are investing some time here, right? So what do you expect?
New features of Angular 4.
No, that you can go. I mean, you can go on the web and figure out what are the new features.
Yeah, how can we get started with Angular 4?
Yeah.
Right. So
In terms of, because when I saw Angular 2, it was quite difficult to set up everything manually. So is there any way we can do it which can be automated to get started?
nice. That's absolutely the point actually. So what we want is we want to know enough and share enough so that we can get started with Angular 2. Rest, where you want to take it up is all up to you. So our goal will be to get you guys started.
And Amit, I have a question. So what are the main performance improvements came from Angular 1 to 4?
Angular 1 to 4. So there are like 4 series, but we'll cover some of it now, and we'll come to know some of them in the next session. So maybe we'll not get to know everything about Angular 4 because there are like more sessions also planned, and I don't want to jump the gun. So when it comes, so there'll be a little patience with that. So that pretty much is the objective, and we got like what we are expecting from it. So the Angular has like it has a journey for quite some time. We are hearing about Angular like probably like last 7-8 years we are talking about Angular. So let's go a little bit back with the JavaScript journey itself. So my journey also was like that only. Like in around 2007-8, I was mostly working into .NET, and I was working on the ASP.NET part. And there I was using a little bit of JavaScript. And basically what we did was like, text box has some text or not, some value or not, that kind of thing we were doing. And pretty much everything was done in the backend side. Then after around 2008-9, I moved into a project which was using Knockout and Jquery. So Jquery was really great, because doing things in the vanilla JavaScript was pretty difficult. And Jquery, made a lot of things very easy for me, and a lot of things I could do, like selecting very complex DOM manipulation I could do, and all those things I could do. Frameworks like Knockout, which provided, they were still libraries, and they were giving like things like observable. They could update the DOM as I'm updating the JavaScript object. So that was great. So in that sense, JavaScript was pretty much, it was maturing, and Angular also comes in that line of growth. So basically when Angular 1 came, it was pretty much a framework. It had everything that you need for building a JavaScript application. And if you notice, prior to Angular or some frameworks like Backbone or those things, most of the things were done in backend. We had things like JSP and all those things. And all that the front end did was they were just rendering the HTML page, and they were not doing much. But starting Angular, most of the logic, the whole architecture, like things like ASP.NET is now obsolete. And we have moved into the architecture of like it is a web API and front end Angular or React or something. So basically what happened is, if you look at most of the applications now, the backend is pretty much what they're doing is they're just querying the database and passing off the data to the front end. And that is possible because Angular itself is pretty strong. It is like a complete framework which can handle like very complex things. So as you can see, like, so we have in Angular, like we have like Angular 1.x, That is pretty much what we call AngularJS. And Angular 2 onwards, we refer it as Angular. So from Angular to Angular 1 to Angular 2, there is a major jump. What that means is like Angular 1 application, you cannot convert it to Angular 2 application easily. You have to, there are like documentation for that, but still like for a large it will be very difficult. But Angular 2 and Angular 4 is just the same thing, pretty much the same thing. It's like improving the what you already have. And Angular will probably be releasing Angular 5. I think they have already released, and Angular 6, 7 it will come, but they will just be like version changes with more from the functionality added. But Angular 1 to Angular 2 is a major change, and it is a breaking change. So we'll move on. So I just want to show you like this slide because we'll be referring to the component a lot. So as you can see, I'm just comparing the Angular 1 to Angular 2. In Angular 1 architecture we had controller, that was the base of Angular application. And there was a concept of view and scope. So all that is gone in Angular 2. What we have in Angular 2 is pretty much what we have is components. Component is a new web standard. And a component can be described as a single unit which pretty much has everything what it requires and it is not dependent on other things compared to a controller which is dependent on other things like template and all those things. But a component you can see like we have a selector which is the how you declare it in wherever you want to use it. A template is also part of it, and a CSS style also is part of this only. It is not mentioned, but it is there. And pretty much a component is also a class. So in class, you have the fields, you have all the methods, you have constructor and everything. So that's pretty much a component. We'll come to it later. Now coming to Angular 2 architecture. Now if you think about Angular 1, the Angular 1 learning curve was not very simple. It took some time. And if you have worked in Angular 1, it would have probably taken like 3 weeks or maybe a month to get hold of all the different things. Like there is a config, you would declare a module, then declare all the dependent modules, then the run block is there, then controller is there, service is there. In service also there is like a factory and service. You always confuse like what it is. For a developer it doesn't make any difference, but you have to learn all those things. Whereas like if you see Angular 2, pretty much what we have is a component. A component has a template URL where you define your template. You have a style where you can define your CSS, and then you have a class attached to it. There you can just like you write regular methods. You have regular constructor. They can do the dependency injection and all those things. So the learning curve in Angular 2 is pretty much very easy. In 1 week you can understand what is Angular 2. You'll not know everything, but you know enough to write any code. So if you'll see this architecture also, we have a root component and then we have menu component and other components, but other components are also same component. So Angular architecture is pretty much like if you understand component well, you pretty much know what is an Angular 2 application. So anybody has any question, then you can just ask. TypeScript. Yeah.
Yeah. How about the different components we had in Angular 1, like services, then we have directives. Those comes under a different hierarchy. And when we saw this Angular 2 architecture, we just see components. So does component include directive within itself, or it's a separate?
No, there are like directives, there are like services, but they are very much simplified now. They are pretty much like a class itself with a little bit of annotation. So the details we'll get into like the next session actually. So I'll not get into detail of component and those things now. But yeah. So one of the best things that Angular 2 comes with is TypeScript. So TypeScript is what Microsoft has created, and Angular is what Google creates. So it is not like mandatory to use TypeScript with Angular. You can use regular JavaScript, but TypeScript is what Google recommends, and it works pretty well. To understand, so does anybody has any background with TypeScript here? You guys already know, right? Okay. So we'll get into a little bit into TypeScript. Oh, you guys already know. So TypeScript is a strongly typed object-oriented compiled language. So what does this mean? So what this means is in JavaScript pretty much what you have is var to declare variables. So that causes a lot of problems in runtime. Now TypeScript is strongly typed. So basically at compile time you can declare, you can provide the types, and TypeScript will take care of type checking, and of any compile time error it will provide you that. And it will not compile if there is any error. Object oriented means it supports everything that traditional languages support, like classes, inheritance, abstraction, constructor, all those things. Compile language, it is compiled, so basically TypeScript cannot be used as it is. It is compiled and then it is being consumed in a project. TypeScript is both a language and a set of tools. So TypeScript is a little more than a language. A language is like declaring a class, declaring a for loop, declaring a variable. This is all language. Set of tools means like, it has also, it provides additional set of tools which makes life of a person who writes in TypeScript really easy. So we'll know like what are those tools a little bit later. TypeScript is a type superset and JavaScript compile JavaScript. So TypeScript is a superset. As you can see in the diagram also, everything that is JavaScript is a TypeScript also. So, okay, we'll come to that later. So TypeScript is JavaScript plus some additional features. So move to the next. So we have certain features of TypeScript. TypeScript is just JavaScript. So any file that is JavaScript is also TypeScript. TypeScript supports other JS libraries. So TypeScript basically compiles into JavaScript, so it can be used with any other library, any library that is JavaScript. JavaScript is TypeScript. What that means, like let's say your project is in JavaScript and you want to move to TypeScript. The only thing that you have to do is you have to rename your files to .ts and compile it. So basically, if it is already JavaScript, it won't make any changes. But so that's the thing. Any type JavaScript file is also a TypeScript file. TypeScript is portable. What this means is like it can run. Basically, it is JavaScript end of the day, so it can run on any browser, anywhere JavaScript can run. TypeScript can also work. So from the diagram, you can see. So a little bit on the ECMAScript. So ECMAScript is the standard that JavaScript is based on. Currently, browsers are supporting ECMAScript 5, but we have like ECMAScript 6 standards also out, which basically support classes and all those things. So TypeScript supports ECMAScript 5. Everything what we have in the ES5 is there, and everything that is in ES6 is there. Plus, we have also TypeScript also gives some additional things, like features like generics, which are not available in ES6, are still available in TypeScript. So basically, what happens is when you have write generics in TypeScript, then how does the browser understand? Because that is not supported by browser, right? So what really happens is the TypeScript compiler will compile into ECMAScript 5, and that is what runs. But as a programmer, you get all the features to write such a code. So why should we use TypeScript? TypeScript is extended JavaScript. Like writing TypeScript is pretty much same as writing JavaScript, not fundamentally different. Whereas languages like Dart, CoffeeScript, these also support types, but they are like different languages. You have to learn it to use it. Whereas TypeScript, you don't. The learning curve is not there. I mean, pretty much, if you know JavaScript, you can get started with TypeScript. And TypeScript doesn't need any different environment because it ultimately compiles into JS. It provides you type. So typing is important because let's say, when you create a JavaScript function, it has a input type of, let's say, product. Now with that, there's very little information. You don't know product is a string, a number, or an object, or whatever it is. You have no idea about it. But when you use TypeScript, a type will be declared, a type will have certain things, and you will exactly know what that means. So basically, when you use types, it is more informative. You're looking at a function, you know what it accepts, what is the output, and those things. And again, TypeScript supports all the programming features like classes, interface, and implementation. So finally, TypeScript is a language which helps you write the language. There's a compiler which compiles into JavaScript and has language services. What are language services? So basically, let's say you want to rename, you have a JavaScript file and you rename a variable. There is no way for the editor to tell you that, you know, what are the different places you have to rename it. So basically, what does the language service do? It provides that information to the editor so that the editor can mark them into red, and you can figure out that these are the places I need to rename, and you can easily do it. You know, these things like Microsoft is pretty good at it. I mean, if you look at Visual Studio, you know, they have really used it pretty well. And a lot of things like IntelliSense and all those things come through these language services. And this is like very strongly inbuilt into TypeScript. So what are the new things in Angular 2 which are exciting and which are good? Moving from controller to the component, that we already saw. So component is pretty much, you know, it has everything it is in itself. You know, it doesn't interfere with other component. For example, we'll come to that later. And TypeScript is definitely one of the great assets. Improved data binding. So if you see the syntax, you'll have like ng src is equal to something, and the second one is the Angular 2 syntax. So in Angular 1, you know, you have to remember a lot of things. You know, something, and if for any language, you know, if you have to remember a lot of things, it becomes difficult. You know, if you have to write some code, and if you have to remember 20 things, it will be very difficult to write that code. But what if, you know, you really don't have to remember, you know, then things like life becomes easy. Like source is an attribute of HTML, and you don't have to remember. Only the thing you have to remember is the square bracket, and everything that else is like whatever HTML comes with. So that so the thing is that you have to remember less, and it obviously writing code will be easy. So we have lazy loading in Angular 2. What that means is like when your application becomes very large, let's say application has an admin module and it has some user module. Let's say admin logs in, and he's never going to use the user module anytime, but the entire application loads. So unnecessarily, you know, a lot of things loads which the user is not even going to use it. And what lazy loading does is it only loads, you can configure it to load only the part which you need at that point of time. And especially in mobile devices, you know, if you have very heavy, then it will not perform up to the mark. Data flow.
Amit, one question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in Angular 1, by default, everything gets loaded on the first call,
yeah,
as compared to lazy loading.
Right. And see, there are ways to achieve that, but that's like you have to apply hack to do that. You know? But Angular 2 supports that at the framework level itself. So you don't have to do anything special to achieve that.
Okay.
The data flow, if you look at like Angular 1, we had scopes, we had root scope, we had services. So data flows from anywhere to anywhere. You know, one controller, it flows. It has not been done properly, then to understand that will be very difficult. Whereas in Angular 2, like it is pretty simple. Every component has a defined way of input, how it is getting the input, a very defined way of how it is generating the output and the output events.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes the data flow, and when the data flow is simple, then understanding the application when it grows up it also becomes easy. Then we have static template compilation with this. So what this means is like, so from HTML, you know, you could call any function. Now there was like earlier, there was no way in Angular when to tell, let's say a module is there. There was no way to tell that this module is actually used in the code or not at runtime. But what Angular 2 does is it compiles the HTML during build time and figures out, all the things which are really required or not. If they're not required, then they are like dead code and it should not be come to. So that pretty much like reduces the code size that comes to your browser.
What's the code size? What we need to use for that?
It does it. It is.
What's the tags that we need to use for that?
What is?
What are the tags that we need to? Let's say you have some SH attribute that you are having, right?
So this is part of Angular 4.
Okay.
It is ahead of time AOT compilation, it is called, and it will by default it will compile through all the HTML files and it will figure out what are the dependencies. And if there is something which is not dependent, then it will not include in the build.
Okay.
So it pretty much like reduces the code to around 60% in many cases. Support for web workers. Now JavaScript is a single-threaded language. So basically, what it means, let's say if you're getting 50,000 records for something and you need to do some processing, then your browser pretty much hangs. Now earlier, like there was no like direct support for web workers. You had to use some hack to do it, and it was not very easy. But Angular 2 supports it directly, and you have like Angular 2 APIs which you can access. So your application can be pretty responsive while processing. You can actually, if you plan well, then you can do most of your processing in the web worker, and your application will be pretty responsive during all those times. Component CSS. So what this means is like every component has a CSS file attached to it, and that CSS will pretty much affect only that component. So if it has a child component, so you can pretty much use the same classes in different components. You can without worrying about like it will affect or not, because each component is self-contained and doesn't affect other components. So that is pretty good idea, because otherwise earlier you have to be careful. If in one file you have a class and you could not use that in another file. So those complexities are gone here.
Does it hierarchy component is
See, only if there is a way to like affect the child component, but only if you want to. Otherwise, whatever CSS you write will only affect that component. If there is a child component, it will not affect.
Let's suppose I have different tag.
I'll show you at the end. I'll show you at the end. Native web support. So what this means is Angular 2 was actually, while developing, they were focusing more on the mobile only, and web, they took care of the web issues only once they were, when they sorted out the mobile issues. So basically why native support is because what happens is like, if you are writing some logic, it doesn't matter. But if you're using in mobile, if you're accessing camera, then writing a web program, you will not be able to do that. You have to run in the native environment. Now in Angular 2 supports that, so whatever code you are writing, it will run equally well in a native app also. So that is the same developer can write pretty much same code and it will run in all the different environments. Now Angular 4 features and performance. So Angular 4, so basically there's a misconception, people about Angular 2 and Angular 4. Because they seem to think that Angular 4 is like way different than Angular 2, but that's not the case. Basically what happened is like they adopted a versioning technique, and in which they have a progressive version changes. And what happened is they already had a component before they adopted that, which was already version 3. So that's why they skipped Angular 3 and they released Angular 4. In future, you'll have, because now they're following this versioning pattern, so you'll see Angular 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, as it comes. So Angular 4, they are definitely improving things as they are releasing higher versions. Angular 4 is like smaller and faster. In many cases, they have the view engine that they have is like almost 60% less size than what they had in Angular 2. Earlier, like the animation package was in the core. So, but in a lot of projects, like, animation is not used at all. But it is shipped because it is already there. So what they did is they separated out the animation package, and it will be included only if you import it and use it. Otherwise, it will not be part. Improved syntax. Angular 4 has some more things, like, like we have ngIf in the template. Now we also have else, which you can use it. So things like that are there. They also Angular 4 also supports. I think Angular 2 was supporting TypeScript 2, but Angular 4 is supporting 2.1 and 2.2 also. So basically, with TypeScript, we'll get more features which you can use. Source map for template. Basically, when you're debugging, you want to exactly know, which file, which line got the code. So these are the source map tells you exactly, you can trace you where exactly that happens. So these are the things. There will be more things which we can explore later. So how much time we took?
So if the Angular itself can be unified, or that itself is a unified version?
Which one?
Angular. Angular 4.
Angular core framework is only taking care of it. We don't have to worry about that. Like minification, you're talking about a JS file. That is different. Like that
So
is.
similar way everything is there for Angular, because Angular itself is smaller and faster.
Yeah, because they are like the size of the view engine code, the code that runs everything, they've already reduced it to the minimum. And they're also like removing all the dead modules and dead things. So anything earlier it used to be added by default. If it is not going to be used in the project, they're not including it.
So you'll be touching the debugging session on that also?
Yeah, it will happen probably in the next couple of sessions. So in this session, we'll also create a Angular app, and then we'll just go through some of the key files in that, and then we'll do the question and answer.
We're creating an app now.
Yeah, it will few minutes.
Tool name.
This is the editor Atom which I'm using, but this is not mandatory.
What is this? Name?
Atom. This is what I've been using for past couple of years, but anything is fine. You can use anything, but it gives me a little bit of. I'm used to using this. That's it.
VS Code also we can.
Yeah, you can use VS Code. You can use Visual Studio also runs it. So editor is not a problem. You can use anything you want. The only thing is I am comfortable with this, so I use it. So this projector is actually messing up my screen. I don't know how to. Wait. Okay, I think this is fine. So basically, we have Angular CLI, which you can use it for creating projects, and it is pretty. Basically, it creates all the project structure and everything in the correct format, so you really don't have to worry about it. So I have Angular CLI installed, so I don't have to install it. But if you are going to use it, then you have to install Angular CLI. And Angular CLI syntax is like this: ng and then certain command. It will do it. So this is the command I ran. I ran ng new app my app. So basically what it did is created all the files that are required, and it also installed all the npm and everything. So pretty much we have the Angular application ready. So I'll just
set up this Angular 4, whether you need to install Node.js and then.
Yeah, Node.js. No, Angular 4 doesn't need Node.js. But if you want to run it locally, you need a web server. So Node.js comes in handy. But the Angular 4, you can run it in any web server. Node.js is not a requirement at all. But
external
npm requires Node.js.
external components.
Huh?
Like React, we have external React components, right? Here also we have external component kind of thing.
External component means what?
Someone has developed it, some
Node module, right?
applications,
npm. Yeah.
That also is possible.
Yeah, I'll show you.
My first one.
No, it was literally my app.
The first one. Top one.
Is
So,
it?
first one.
You guys know more than me. No, this is not the one. No, you did it. Yeah, I think this is the one. So this is the one. So we'll just run the application. So for running, the only thing you have to do is ng-serve. So if you do it via Angular CLI, you know, it does all the building and everything. And it is also compiled everything and everything. And one thing I'll show you, like if you'll see index.html, I don't have anything imported, like I don't have any JS file imported. So what it does is it does everything at the, when it is building, it is also including it. So this is the app is running. We'll make a few changes and see, like, you know, it is actually working or not. So let's declare. And then what we'll do is we'll declare some CSS for it. And then we have, we'll come to it later. I'll just remove all these things.
Closing that.
Which one?
Okay. Have component.html.
Okay, I'll come. Yeah. So as you can see, it this is a feature of Webpack. It automatically detects the changes and it builds itself. So the important thing, what you see here is, you know, I have the same h1 class in the HTML file. Also, I have the same h1 element in the app component also, but different CSS is being applied. You can clearly see it, right? So that is very important, you know. So I don't have to worry, you know, if I use a class in component, in a various component, I can reuse the same class without worrying that it will really affect or not. So I'll just give you one more example, like, you know, how we should, we can create another component and then we'll go through the file structure. So all you can all do all these things with Angular CLI.
If I want to reuse the CSS that was created in app component.css and in a different component, then how can I use that CSS?
So there is a way, like there is a way like you can use a deep syntaxes there, so it will affect
Deep syntax.
Yeah. And other thing is like you can declare that in the global CSS file if you want
Only for two components I want the same CSS to be used. Let's
Only
say
for-
H1 you created magenta color for H1, right? I want to use this color. I don't want to create a CSS separate style for it. Is there a way that we can do that?
See, there is a way like you can affect the child component CSS also. So that you can do. You can use-
Now you did the parent and child almost similar, right? Main is styles is the main parent.
So there is like there are like a couple of options here. If you declare that in the global style.css, it will apply to everywhere. Or if you have it in a child component, but it will affect all the child components. You cannot control like it will only affect the second child or such. If you use that syntax, it will affect all the childs.
But you can override.
But you
So
can-
that-
So basically, if you use Angular CLI, what happens is it created all the files for me. It created a home component CSS, created the HTML file, created the for unit testing file, it created a component file, and created what it is also updated the module file for me. So now for every time you create a new component, you have to update in a module. It is already updated, so you can use it. Now let's do one thing. Okay, so actually I have to include this component in, right. Let's see what is the component name. Yeah, right. So you can see all the three components are using the same element, and it is being applied, and it's not affecting any other component. So that is,
override the styles.
yeah, there is a way you can override, but in most cases you don't want, because the component is a self-contained block, right? So you don't want anything else to affect your component externally. Ideally, I mean, in project you will have requirement like that, but normally you will not need it. Now we go through the file structure. So that is doing pretty much it is building and everything, so you're not seeing the intermediate step. So we'll just do this intermediate step and then so basically it created a dist folder, and this is exactly what you can deploy in your production server or whatever. Basically whatever you have is index.html, and then you have all the JS files, and you have the source map file. So this is what we have. Now coming back to the project file, we have package.json where you have all the dependencies and all the dev dependencies. So you were asking about the dependencies, right? So you can normally, like, the way you install an npm module, same thing you have to do it, and then you can use it. You can import and use it in your project.
Yeah, by default, TypeScript version is, what is the TypeScript version it was mentioned here?
TypeScript.
Dev dependencies class.
Dev dependencies. 2.4. Because obviously we are doing CLI, so they are taking over everything is latest. It is taking the latest. And then you have for unit testing, you have karma and everything. All the setup is there. So if you do through Angular CLI, you can do it directly. And the TypeScript config file, you mentioned ES5 is the target, so that is what it will compile to.
But why we are not using ES6 here?
See, ES6 is standards out. Many browsers support it, but web is like a democratic thing, right? So not everybody has implemented ES6. So your application might run in one browser, but it may not run in another.
So ES6 is not a browser compatible device.
ES is the standard that JavaScript has to adopt. So ES5 was released in 2009, and everybody has adopted it. ES6 was released in 2015, and many people have adopted it, many people haven't. So till everybody adopts it, it will probably be application is built in this. So once they adopt it, then there will be no need to compile into ES5.
The upcoming version of browsers will adopt that ES6.
Yeah, in browsers also, see, there are many browsers, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So every single browser, your application should run into every single browser. So that is why we are compiling to ES5. And the way nature of web is, it is very difficult. It will happen in near future. It will take some time. But obviously, you don't need to worry because you have to code in TypeScript, right? You don't have to code in ES5. Okay. So now coming back. So we'll start with this one. So basically, this is every application starts with the index of HTML, and this is what we have. So this is where your Angular 2 root object is declared, and the script tags are not there, but they are being added at build time. So normally, if you don't use Webpack or anything like that, then you'll have to manually add it. But I think the easiest way is to use what the infrastructure is supporting. You don't have to worry about those things. So the JavaScript starts with main.ts. This is what the TypeScript takes in as an input and compiles it. So the first module is the Angular core. Angular core has the core features and core, and this is what every single Angular 2 application will require. So that is what is there in Angular core. Then they have separated and platform browser dynamic. This is the module which bootstraps your application, that is makes your application ready to be run on a browser. App module is your module, that is the root module that your application starts. Environment is for different environment, not important. And this particular line is what it is bootstrapping the application, and it is starting with the app module. So if you'll see, app module is imported from app module.ps. So we'll go to that. This is the module. So browser module is the first module that is imported. This is what provides the various syntax, like all the derivatives like ng, if, for, and all those things. ng module is the root module for creating a module. So everything, you know, in Angular 2, the components are clubbed into a module. App component is the component that we created, and home component is a new component we created. So if you see the Angular module syntax, we have we have a regular class, and that class is annotated to become a module or a component.
ES6.
Huh?
ES6.
This is ES6.
Yeah, but there you are ES5.
ES5 it will compile to ES. Like if you see the dist folder, it will not be like this. Like if I
Is there any Babel RCL or something?
no, TypeScript is doing that. Yeah.
Oh, TypeScript.
TypeScript is that.
There it is Babel RCL.
Like if you'll see this is, if you'll see, it is all converted to ES5. Yeah, so every class has to be annotated to be treated differently. So this particular class has annotated as ng module, and any component you want to use it, you have to declare it in this section. So we have app component, home component declared. Now this can be used as part of this module. Anything you import, like browser module is what you're importing, so you have to import that. Providers are, if you create any services, then you have to declare it in a provider so that you can use it. And Bootstrap is the starting component that will be loaded. So now we'll go to the app component. So if you'll see the app component syntax, it is again any regular ES6 class plus the annotation. It is annotated as component. It has a selector. This is the app root we saw in the index.html. Then we have the template URL. So every component will have a template and a style URL. So we'll go to the HTML thing. So in HTML, you can see, like, you know, whatever variables you declare, you can use it. Similarly, all the syntax like ngf and those things will come in the next when we do the components. And again, if you'll see the another component, home component, it's pretty much the same. So basically, if you learn one component, it is like you can extend it to go any level. So that's pretty much what we wanted to cover.
I have a question here. So we have export class home component. Okay. Similarly, if I write something export class some XYZ, right? So now the home.html can use the other class objects as well, or only this class object?
So this is a class, right? So you are exporting this ng module can import it.
No, this is an export class.
Right.
And I will write one more export class in the same page, same TS file. Home component.ts file, I will write one more class. Name is some different name. And it has a attribute called.
See, this is the syntax of a component. So a class will be there, but it will not become a component. A component syntax is like this. Like if you want to do something, you can try it out, how it behaves. But this is how you declare a class.
Because the component name, I mean the home component name is not at all used anywhere.
Yeah, so if in a JS file, you have the app component annotation plus a class, so it becomes a component.
Yeah. Selectors we have, right? Okay, by use of selectors only. We
selector is like what you declare, like it app component in HTML you use it, right?
So,
and style is like a regular style. The only benefit here is that style will only affect that component, so that is the only thing. So I hope it was easy.
So where is the real dependency injection part coming in here? The command?
So dependency injection will come when we do component detail, like you see, like in TypeScript we have using regular class, right? So class has a constructor. So if you have to inject anything, you have to do it in the constructor.
And then comparing with the Angular 1 part, it was pretty much simple for dependency injection.
See, there are like other things also. They're like child injector, and those things will come to know in the when you do components. but the dependency injection is much more improved in Angular 2. That much I can say. Like, see, what happens is, like, you know, somebody is writing in JavaScript code, and if you talk to somebody who is doing backend code, they will have very different views. But now with TypeScript, you know, a backend developer can easily come in and write Angular 2 code. There is no
test case for a company.
Huh?
You write one test case for a company.
I haven't tried it, so probably this is not the right thing.
Yeah, can we have multiple modules so that?
But we'll include it when you do component. We'll include it. What is that?
Can we have multiple modules?
Yeah, you can have multiple modules.
Okay.
Like module and component will cover it in the next session, but you can definitely have an idea is like, you know, you can have like similar components clubbed into a module, and that enables to have things like lazy loading and those things, because you can load only at module level. And also, and one thing is, you know, like if you import a module, then you don't need to import individual components individually. So that is also one benefit. Like if you import the module, then you can directly use all the components right away. Any more questions?
What's the use of TS lint file? In the
TS?
structure, there was one file, TS lint class.
So this is the lint, as you know, when you write the code, then it will give all the errors. Like you can specify certain, like you have to declare the, let's say you have to declare the variables in camel case. So how do you enforce all the developers to that? So that kind of.
What is that? 2 insects over there.
2 insects. So this is the thing of editor, you know, it this has some 2 problems. You have to fix it.
Accion is available for Windows also.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, I found it little very useful because it has a lot of packages, you know, like it comes like itself, but you can install a lot of things, and once you have everything, then it is very useful. They're also very light, you know, for opening, like it doesn't take, like if one Visual Studio, it will take some time, but this is.
It works in V8.
Huh?
It works in V8.
And again, I don't know, like if you're using it, I get all the command prompts here. So that is also one benefit for me. Like I don't have to have, in Windows you have, in Mac you have like, you know, multiple tabs, but in Windows you don't have that. So if you use this, you can have unique command.
VS Code also we can have this kind of.
You can have this in almost all the modern projects like Atom brackets that we Visual Studio Code. There's a lot of.
So should we wrap anything? So we'll like this is only the first session. So we'll have like 3 more sessions. The next session will take into the components. Harsha will be doing it. We'll take component and module in detail, and probably whatever questions are asked now about this, we'll be covering that.
We'll do it Thursday, right?
Yeah.
Thursday.
And after this, after Harsha, there is one more guy, Bharat. He's also there. So Bharat will do another thing like routing and forms and all those things. And then we'll have a final session. We'll do a small project, and then we'll do the hands-on thing, and we'll see like. So most probably after 4 sessions, you'll have enough to like get into a project and get started. So,
Thank you.
so that's it. Thanks everyone.
Hey guys, don't
Yeah.
leave it.